Please come up.
Stand next to it, make sure you cover your eyes.
Just do whatever you know.
Just do whatever Liliana does.
Okay. Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher הקשבנו למצוותיו, וציוונו לתכלית שיש אהבה. Amen.
Give each other a hug. Wish each other Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Now I'll ask the old question, and by now some of you probably know the answer. Can we command love?
No.
Well, what's your opinion, George?
No.
Why?
Borges said it best. Love is like reading. You cannot force someone to read. They have to want to do it.
Okay. Love is like reading, so you can't force somebody to read. Do you agree with that, Sydney?
Agreeable.
That's agreeable. So in order for you to enjoy reading, you got to actually read. And love is not a feeling as it is a way of acting. And so we say here that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. And the rabbis tell us something very interesting about this. What if, for instance, a person said to you, your money or your life? What do you tell them?
How much?
How much do you want?
How much do you want? Okay. Now let's say it's a matter of religion. Your faith or your money?
What?
What if a person tells you your faith or your money or your life? What do you say then?
What if I'm not Jewish?
Well, we're talking about members of the tribe, of course.
Oh, okay. You gotta
Okay, the answer is very simple. In Jewish history, there were many Jews who said, during the time of the Inquisition, we can't leave Spain. So we're going to be secret Jews, and those Jews became known as Marranos. But why did they become Marranos? Because they couldn't imagine giving up everything they'd worked so hard for to go to a new land without anything to show for it. And so this is a problem that's happened many times in Jewish history. I remember with the Ayatollah Khomeini. You know the Ayatollah, don't you? He's also known as the Ayatollah of rock and roll. Just making a joke. Okay, the Ayatollah of rock and roll, when he took over Iran, a lot of Jews had the opportunity to leave, but they didn't. Why? For exactly the same reason. And so you see, the Talmud tells us that we have to love God with all our heart, all our soul, and with all our money. And that's not easy. All right. These words I command you this day, you shall teach them diligently to your children. What words are we talking about here?
10 words.
We're talking about the 10 Commandments. So how do we teach our children about the 10 Commandments?
By example.
Well, the best way is by example. But we need to talk about it to our children when we're walking, outside, wherever we go. When we go to bed at night, when we get up in the morning, and we shall bind them as a sign upon your arm. That's where tefillin comes from. But Rashbam says, doesn't mean tefillin. It means that we should love God as if that love were bound to our arm. And we should love God so much it would be as if God is in the front of our mind at all times. And that interpretation also comes from Philo of Alexandria. Okay, let's continue the end of the Shema, which talks about the theme of Exodus. Now, why do we remember the Exodus? Probably to teach us that it's not a one-time event. Egypt is a symbol of slavery. And people today are enslaved to many things. What's one thing people are enslaved to?
Money,
What about power?
prestige.
Prestige, control. What do you say, Pauline? All the above.
She said women.
And so, you know, so leaving Egypt is not easy when we are slaves of habit. So what the prayer teaches us is that we need to liberate ourselves. And just like every person has a Moses pushing them towards redemption, every person also has their own little Pharaoh who says, do not change, be the same, remain the same forever. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתי קדושים לכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם amen. Everyone make contact with your neighbor, look at their eyes and say Adonai Elohim amen. Your God is a God of truth. So we look at our kids when we say that. What does that mean? We can learn about God from our children. And our children can learn something about God from us, their parents. One of my favorite themes that I like to address from time to time is the priestly benediction. And the reason why is because it's a prayer that's very familiar to all of us. The words are simple. Tell Aaron and the sons, this is how you shall bless the Israelites. Say to them, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and grant you peace. Shalom. And so they will put my name on the Israelites, and I will bless them.
Amen.
How many words does this prayer contain?
15.
That's very good. 15 words. And what does the number 15 correspond to?
Shema.
No. Corresponds to the two-letter name of God, which is Yah. So if you add Yud and Hey, it represents 15. And so the priestly benediction calls upon us to invoke God in our lives. Now, there's some interesting laws regarding a Kohen. Kohen has to be a nice person. He has to be someone that people respect. He has to be someone who is, in many ways, the epitome of everything that's right in a community. Many years ago, when I was in Glens Falls, New York, we had one Kohen in the community that was very combative, and he used to argue and fight with everyone. And when it came to saying the priestly benediction, the community actually told him not to bless the congregation. Now, why is that? Well, if you take a look at the blessing that the Kohen says, L'varech et amo Yisrael b'ahava, you must bless the congregation of Israel with love. And if you don't have love for the community, then you don't have a right to bless the community. Now, this man's son was someone I was very close to, and he passed away just a couple years ago. His name was Norm Kudan. And he was the exact opposite. And whenever there was a funeral, he stood outside the cemetery and greeted every person. He was gracious, he was magnanimous, he was generous. He embodied the very best characteristics of what it means to be a priestly people. So if you look at the priestly benediction, you notice something very interesting. And that is the emphasis of God's face. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. What is so special about the human face?
It's uniqueness.
Well, every human face is unique. That's true, George. And how many of you have ever seen John Kerry?
The politician?
No, John Kerry, not talking about him. I'm talking about the actor, the comedian.
Oh.
He can contort his face into a million different shapes. But really, if you think about it, the human face is capable of almost infinite expression. And what is so special about the face is that it reflects our individuality. Our face is a mirror of our soul. So if you study body language, and body language is a fascinating area of psychology, you can learn a lot about a person in terms of how they look and interact with people. I was listening to a lot of the body language expositions during the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, and it was very, very interesting to see how people relate to someone that's on trial. Does the individual convey friendliness? Is it sincere? Is the person rigid? Does the person have difficulty expressing oneself? Because when we express our emotions, we sometimes make ourselves vulnerable to another person. And some people are just by nature very uncomfortable with that. So they'll stay to themselves. But what is so special about the human face? Is that you can only hide so much. And if you are a student of human nature, you can tell when someone is feeling down. You can tell when they're feeling sad. You can tell when someone feels as if the weight of the world is collapsing on their shoulders. And then you can tell when someone is genuinely happy and has a pleasant disposition towards all people. And you notice this, particularly in the political arena. How do you respond to a stranger? How do you respond to a waiter in a restaurant, or a nurse, or to a doctor? Bedside manner is very important. What makes a successful doctor is someone who can connect with his patients. Because a human being is something magnificent. And our face reflects our state of mind. And so we find some interesting laws here. When you're greeting somebody, Jewish tradition raises the question, how should you greet somebody? Well, let's take a look at a few scenarios. When you greet somebody, do you show them your profile and shake like that? No. Okay. When you greet somebody, do you look at your cell phone and shake like that? No, that's not.
Shalom.
Okay, that's not appropriate either. So how should you greet somebody? Face to face, with a happy disposition. Now I have to tell you, when I was a young Hasidic Jew, living in Brooklyn, New York, I learned a very valuable lesson from an old Hasid. Now this Hasid had spent many years in a Russian prison camp for practicing his Judaism in Russia, which was illegal. And yeshiva students had a terrible habit of shaking hands. Bora, come up here, let me illustrate. You know how yeshiva students shake hands? They say like this, Shabbat Shalom. Now, does that make you feel like the person's happy to greet you? Definitely not. But let's try this. Shabbat Shalom. Do you see the difference? The power of a greeting indicates that you're happy to meet the person. And I remember when I held my hand like this, the yeshiva style, we call it the cold fish handshake. You know what he said to me in Yiddish? He says, "Was ist mit dir? What is your problem? Du bist ein Mensch? Are you a corpse? Am I shaking hands with a corpse? Is that how you greet people?"
9.
No, you have to greet people with enthusiasm. You have to make eye contact with your neighbor and let them feel as if you're happy to see them. And that really is very, very important. Let me tell you a story. Okay, so you have to have countenance, you have to have pleasant expression. And let me just tell you one of my favorite stories. Arlene has heard this story a few times, but the story takes place during the Holocaust. And you have these two neighbors. One is a Hasidic rabbi, or a very Orthodox rabbi, and the other one is a very prim and proper German person. Now, I have to tell you, German people are very, very fastidious about their property. You will always find their property perfectly manicured. Everything is prim and proper. And this old Jew used to wear a top hat. And he would greet his neighbor every morning, and his neighbor's name was Herr Muller, which means Mr. Muller. And Mr. Muller would instinctively respond, "Good morning, Herr Rabbiner. Good morning, Mr. Rabbi." And they knew each other for many years, decades. And every morning they exchanged that greeting. "Good morning, Herr Muller. Good morning, Mr. Muller." And you would reply, "Good morning, Herr Rabbiner." And there was a smile on both of their faces. But as it turned out during World War II, Jews found themselves in cattle cars, taken to the concentration camps. And this old rabbi had his beard shaven off. He scarcely looked like the old person he used to be. And he saw the commandant, the commander in the camp, pointing to the right indicated you would live. If he pointed to the left, it meant you would go straight into the crematoria. That's what happened to my grandmother. And he looked at this commandant. He had a very stern appearance. He was wearing a monocle in one eye. He had a little hand whip in the other. And he was very, very stern. But there was something strange but familiar. And he said, rather spontaneously, he said, "I know this person." And out of the depths of his being, he said, "Good morning, Herr Muller. Good morning, Mr. Muller." And out of that Nazi commandant came an instinctive response. "Good morning, Herr Rabbiner." Martin Buber writes about these moments. Transformative moments. When two people from two different backgrounds make eye contact. And it was almost as if they were transported backwards in time. It was almost as if they could both remember the time they were neighbors. and would greet each other every day. And the commandant said, "Hey, Rabbiner, what are you doing here?" Now that's a rather silly question when you consider the circumstances. What could he say? I took a wrong detour. I got lost. Made a wrong turn. No, the best answer he gave was, with his little shoulders, he went like, what else could I do? And he said, "Don't worry, Herr Rabbiner." And the very next day, he transferred him to Theresienstadt, a much better concentration camp in Czechoslovakia, where he had a very good chance to survive. And survive he did. And many years later, when he was gathering his family together for a party, and they were talking about their experiences in the camp, he said something very valuable that his family members never forgot. Never, ever underestimate the power of a greeting. Because just maybe it might spell the difference between life and death itself. And so, one of the things that Judaism celebrates is recognizing holiness in our most simple transactions with people. You know, when I go to a Baskin-Robbins store, sometimes I see a young teenager, not very happy, maybe having a bad day. And I say to the teenager, what are you upset about? You have a problem with your boyfriend, or school, or parents? And I say, you know, I say to them, when someone goes into an ice cream shop, what are they looking for?
Happiness.
They're looking for a little bit of sweetness. That individual may have the worst day imaginable. But when you give that person an ice cream cone and bring a smile to their face, something wonderful takes place. You know what that is? They forget about all of the problems and celebrate the sweetness of the moment.
Like a shave.
And so this is why we have to greet people with kindness, with love, enthusiasm. And now you know the rest of the story. Say the Kaddish for those people that were grieving for they were shot in schools and malls and so many other places. Our country sometimes leaves us with the impression that we've gone mad. And let's pray for the healing that these families need. I wish to add my son, Mendy, who passed away several months ago, and my sister, Jerry, my baby sister. She was so beautiful. Anyone wishing to remember a loved one, you can turn to page 184. Yid Gadol v'Yid Gadash Shemei Rabbah. Yomad Avadatu Lift Mafutei. V'chayifon v'chayifon v'chayiv v'chol Beit Yisrael. V'agalo v'zman korei v'yimru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah v'Barach v'Lamah v'Hamaya. Yid Barach v'Yishtabach v'Ba'ar v'Yirmam v'Yinaseh. V'Hadar v'Tulik Nalal Shemei L'Kutsha v'Richu. Leila min kol b'chata v'shirata v'shukata v'nehamata da'amira miyama v'yirumei yehi shlom rabba v'shamayim v'chayim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'yirumei v'oseh shalom v'ramav u'yaseh shalom aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'yirumei. Now, I'm not a Kohen, but we are members of priestly people. Yivarech Adonai v'yishmerecha.
Kenehi ratzon.
Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichanecha. Yis Adonai panav elecha v'yaseh v'chashalom. May God bless and protect you. May lift His countenance, be gracious to you. May He lift His presence towards you always, and grant you the greatest blessing of all. That blessing is paz y menta, peace of mind. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.